Hello and welcome to our first session in the new Amplification series of Coleman University's Professional Development Program. Today we will re-examine the Gradebook, how it can be used and misused. The setup and use of the Gradebook itself have already been covered in previous professional development training sessions. This training is based on 18 months of experience managing Moodle Gradebooks. We want you to use the Gradebook to your advantage and to avoid the pitfalls. Our short training today is designed to help you recognize how important Gradebooks are in our overall system, review the basics of setting up the Gradebook, talk about some of the issues that have appeared recently, and look at the best practices for Gradebook use. Digital Gradebooks are becoming increasingly important to our university. Capturing the grades, feedback, and student work online allows us to deal with student grievances much more quickly and appropriately for all of our classes. Given the turnover of the adjunct faculty, having the instructor's comments captured in a gradebook allows the deans to deal with the student issues even after the faculty member has left. Finally, using digital gradebooks allows us to quickly and easily amass and assess student performance for purposes of learning assessment and for mandated accreditor reports, an activity that is often difficult and time-consuming in a paper-based system. While these uses may not seem important to you as a faculty member, they are critical for the overall functioning of the university. This is why the Dean of Academics mandated the use of Moodle Gradebooks in web class for all on-ground and online courses. If the Gradebook is so critical, then it begs the question, what is actually in one? Understanding the answer to that question is the crux of the solutions to the problems we have encountered and forms the basis of our brief review of the Gradebook. There are three basic types of records in our Gradebooks. The first is when students digitally turn in work to the web class site. This recorded activity can take many forms: submitting documents or spreadsheets, taking quizzes, completing a lesson activity, or submitting a Turnitin assignment. Anything listed in the front page as an activity in the more recent versions of Moodle falls under this category. The second major category of Gradebook record is when students get credit for offline performances. Older versions of Moodle actually had an offline assignment item, but this no longer appears in the newer versions. These non-digital activities include oral presentations, writing software in a protected sandbox, class participation points when not using the digital attendance tool for this, or any other point-gaining activity that cannot be submitted in digital form to the class. The final record is not of student work, but of the results of grading that work. These are the system calculations within the Gradebook that are done automatically by the software based on the conditions you set. Returning to the first type of record, where students digitally turn in work, it is important to realize that these should be graded through the activity tool itself on the front page and not through the Gradebook. This type of record is always indicated by an active blue link both in the Gradebook and on the front page. By clicking on the activity itself, you are taken to the grading tools within that activity that allow you to assess the student work most efficiently. The grades and feedback comments that you enter within the activity are automatically entered in the Gradebook for you. It is bad practice to manually enter grades in the Gradebook for a blue activity, as this can lead to summation errors in the event of grade changes. Recording offline performance requires the use of manually graded items. These are created within the Gradebook itself in the simple view by clicking the New Grade Item button at the bottom of the page. Their icon is a gray square with a pencil. These grades can only be placed in the Gradebook by turning editing on and manually entering the grades and feedback for each student. As you may recall, it is important to scroll down to the bottom of the Gradebook and click on the Update button when finished, or all of your work will be lost. The final item recorded in the Gradebook is the system calculation. The system calculations are also set up in the simple view and should never be manually overwritten when editing the Gradebook. The icon used for these calculations reflects the statistical nature of the option you have chosen, capital sigma for a sum, or a barred X for an average, for instance. A glance at the top of your gradebook in the Grader view will instantly reveal what type of record is being maintained in that column. If any of this review is confusing to you, you may wish to replay the indicated prior trainings. This is a bit silly, but to avoid confusion in the gradebook, here's a little nursery rhyme to remind you of the basic rules. Most errors and problems we have encountered in faculty gradebooks are because these simple rules were ignored. We have been using Moodle Gradebooks for well over 2 years now. It has only been in the last 6 months that they have been mandated for all courses. As more and more faculty use the Gradebooks, we're finding common problems that could be avoided through the use of good practice. First, we find Gradebooks that were copied from earlier shells, or even the course master shell, that are improperly set up. Grade items in the syllabus are not found in the Gradebook. System calculations, which Moodle calls aggregations, are improperly set, calling for weighted averages instead of a sum of the grades for the final grade, for instance. It is important for faculty members to verify their gradebooks prior to the start of the term. Even when the gradebooks are properly set up, we find faculty members are entering information improperly and causing errors. These mistakes include manually overriding the blue activity items and, even worse, the system calculation column. Once a grade has been manually overrode, changes to that grade made elsewhere in the system will no longer take effect in the gradebook. If the instructor manually entered 10 points for a student's summary grade, that 10 points will remain as the final grade even if the student earns 10,000 points elsewhere in the gradebook. While the system records and calculates the correct grade, the manual override, as its name implies, trumps the calculated figure and is used instead. Some faculty members do not use the gradebook, or simply try to type in final grades in the summary column, which defeats the purpose of having a complete gradebook and does not allow administrators to gather the data necessary for learning assessment and accreditation reports. Some frustrated instructors, unable to get the gradebooks to accurately reflect the points earned in the class, resort to entering manual items as adjustments to try to fix the gradebook without actually understanding what is wrong in the first place, which only compounds the error. Finally, the most critical error: faculty members do not ask for help in a timely manner. Making an initial verification of the gradebook on the day the grades are due is rarely a wise option. So how then do we avoid these historic errors? Through the use of good practice. When you first receive a course shell, good practice dictates that you visually inspect and verify the gradebook, ensuring that it aligns with the approved syllabus and the activities and aggregation settings are correct. This preliminary activity will minimize grading problems in your course. Again, if any of this is unclear, you are encouraged to go back to the earlier professional development courses and review those that involve the setup and use of the gradebook. Allow me a quick sidebar on the gradebook itself from the perspective of a parent. I am always amazed that when one of my children does well, she's referred to as my daughter by my significant other. However, when that same child makes a mistake, she magically becomes your kid. The same thing happens with a gradebook. Faculty are very possessive of my gradebook until they can't get it to calculate correctly, when suddenly it becomes your software that's at fault. In all the errors and mistakes that I have examined in gradebooks, not one has been the result of flawed software. Each one is an example of operator error. Remember that the gradebook will only do what you tell it to do. If it is not calculating correctly, it means that you've asked it to calculate the wrong thing or have given it the wrong data to calculate. If you believe your gradebook to be an error, the first troubleshooting step is to go back and visually verify the gradebook settings. Let's work an example. Here you see a typical gradebook with problems. Take a moment, pause the video, and examine this gradebook. List out the errors you see. When done, go ahead and continue the lesson. The first errors that should have jumped out at you are the manual overrides. These are shown as grades with yellow backgrounds. Remember, yellow means caution. While manual overrides in a blue column are actively discouraged, they're not necessarily errors. They only become errors when the student work is graded through the activity, either before or after the manual override is made, and the grades differ. Since the manual override will not accept changes from the system, there is no guarantee that the grades shown and calculated in the gradebook will match what is shown next to the student's work on the site. This can cause an error. A similar, but far more crucial error is the use of manual overrides in the course total column. As you can see here, the system is reporting that two grades, 50 and 87, are somehow equal to 15, and having grades of 50 and 49 magically total 150 points. This is because once a value has been manually entered into a summary column, new entries and calculations will have no effect. To reiterate, course total columns should never be manually overrode. Leave them alone. Did you catch the final and more subtle error? Look at the icon next to the course total. Is this course total column really showing the sum of all the grades? Look at the grades themselves. Do the figures in the total column make sense given those grades? They don't. The icon is telling us that rather than summing the course grades, this gradebook is set up to take the weighted average of all the grades. Remember that your gradebook, although it looks like a spreadsheet, is not one. Rather, it's an interface with a relational database that controls the information in your course. It is simply made to look like a spreadsheet. In order to adjust settings for this interface, you need to use the pull-down and select Simple View. Here you can see that our subtle problem is front and center on the top of the table. The aggregation is set for the weighted mean of grades. Luckily, by default, the weight is set equally across all the graded items, but still the calculations will be difficult to explain to most students. The mean of all the grades, in this case, is 125 points. In this setup, all of the student grades will be averaged, divided into the average of the maximum total possible grades so far, and then this resulting percentage will be multiplied, in this case, by 1,000 to get the student's current grade. So a student in the first week could be seeing a course score of 1,000 if she received 3 out of the 3 possible points for that one available assignment. If any of the weightings are changed from 1, the calculation becomes even more complex. This unnecessary complexity is not what we want in our gradebooks. We use the simple sum of grades as our default aggregation. It is easier to understand for students and easier to use for faculty. Notice that manually graded items can have their maximum grade value modified in the simple view. However, all blue items, activities, cannot have maximum grade points modified in the simple view. They must be adjusted through the activity itself on the front page using the gray gear icon. Here we modify the gradebook by changing the aggregation to the correct sum of grades. Notice that the weightings are gone, as is the direct opportunity to change manual grades. They can still be changed using the gray gear icon in the simple view. Note that the icon is changed to a capital sigma and that the maximum grades do end up equaling the course total. Going back to our best practices, next we should verify that all instances where students turn in work digitally are properly shown as activities, blue links, and demonstration activities are properly shown as manually graded items, gray pencils. If this is true, our gradebook is now set up correctly in terms of its mechanics. There is still one additional best practice step that has to be accomplished: verifying the gradebook against the approved syllabus. Here you see all the graded items from the syllabus are reflected in the gradebook with the proper point value. Point totals also match. The actual order of the items is not critical. You may find that by moving things around in your gradebook, they make more sense to your students. Best practice is to enter your grade items chronologically from start to finish of the class. Our default is to have the course total as the first column, since it is the most often viewed. At this point, the gradebook is set up and ready to use. However, errors can still be created by the way in which grades are entered. Remember, any yellow background in the gradebook indicates a manual override is present. The only way that a manual override can be created is by turning editing on and typing a grade into the displayed grade box under a blue activity column or a course total column. Entries made under a manually graded item, since they're proper, will have no change in background color. While manual entries can be made relatively quickly when moving down a column, removing manual overrides is a more painful process. Best practice is to export a copy of your gradebook as a spreadsheet before correcting manual overrides. Once corrected, the original manual grade will disappear. Copying the gradebook allows you to re-enter that grade properly through the activity and not lose it. For each incorrect manual override, the instructor must click on the associated gray gear icon, which will open up a separate page displaying the settings for that individual student's grade for that item. Instructors must unclick the override box. The final grade will disappear once you save the entry. If the grade has already been entered through the activity itself, the gradebook will now reflect that activity grade, and the background will no longer be yellow. Any future changes to the grade in the activity will be reflected automatically in the gradebook. Best practices for use of the gradebook include always grading blue activity items through the front page activity link. Use manual items only for performances, that is, gradable activities that cannot be submitted digitally. To help your students navigate their way through your course, always include a label in the relevant week of the front page which describes in detail the manually graded item. If the details on the assignment are longer than a short paragraph or two, consider using a page or a file instead of a label. One final trick for using the gradebook effectively is to turn the quick feedback option on. If, when you turn editing on in your gradebook, you only see a single text box for each grade, you need to turn on the quick feedback option. To do that, click on the grader report under My Preferences in the pull-down, scroll to the General heading, turn on the quick feedback, and save. From that point forward, when you turn editing on in the gradebook, you'll notice two text boxes, one with a solid outline where the grade itself goes, and one with a dashed outline where you can type comments in regarding the grade. This allows you to rapidly enter comments that will help everyone understand the grade. Quick comments like, submission was 3 days late, or incomplete. The student misunderstood the assignment, or the student had a short period of hospitalization, can help in determining why a particular grade was assigned should the question ever arise. While it may take a while to get used to using the digital gradebook, you will save time in grading and return student work far more quickly as you get better at it. The long-term benefits to the university are far greater than the additional effort needed to learn how to use the gradebook properly. The question really is, was it all that much better when you were grading physical pieces of paper and typing grades into a spreadsheet? I don't think so. Next month's application training will be on Turn-It-In assignments. While these are powerful tools for grading and student learning, they also have the potential to be problematic to set up and maintain. We'll talk about some of the lessons learned and best practices for Turn-It-In August. See you then.